There are two dates that anchor this entire story, and everything else radiates outward from the space between them. Hold on to both of them. March 14th, 2024, Meghan Markle steps onto Instagram in soft California light, picking flowers, stirring something warm on a stove, a cursive logo reading American Riviera Orchard, drifting across the screen. It is the debut of her lifestyle brand, all honey jars and curated coastal elegance. Then comes May 3rd, 2024, 7 weeks later, when the Attorney General of California officially declares the Archwell Foundation delinquent, ordering it to stop soliciting donations and stop spending money. Same household, same founders, 7 weeks apart. One project gleaming under a ring light, the other quietly bleeding out while no one with formal authority was positioned to stop it. This is not a story built on gossip or palace insiders. This is a story built on documents, the actual paperwork, the California state filing, the federal tax form with the box that should not have been checked, the Charity Watch letters that went unanswered for 2 full years, and the December 2025 restructure that arrived at exactly the wrong moment and disclosed exactly the wrong things. And threaded through all of it is one question that the timeline keeps raising on its own, without any interpretive help. While Harry's name was attached to headline after headline, who was quietly building the exit? Start with the board, because if you want to understand how a charity operates, you begin with who is watching the money, who sits at the governance table making sure donor funds are reaching the causes they were given for, and that nobody is blurring the line between charitable work and commercial ambition. At the Archwell Foundation, the answer to that question is 2 people, Meghan and Harry. That is the complete governance structure of an organization publicly raising millions of dollars. Charity Watch, the watchdog organization whose entire professional function is evaluating nonprofit financial health, put this observation in writing. The foundation reports only 2 board members, a setup that falls well short of widely accepted nonprofit governance best practices. Translated out of watchdog language, what that means is simple. There is no independent voice at that table. No external trustee. No one present who is not financially tied to the founders and operationally living under the same roof. Think about what that structure means in practice. If one board member wanted to redirect the organization's attention toward a commercial brand launch for several months rather than advancing the charity's programmatic mission, the only person with the formal authority to call a vote or raise an objection is the other board member, who is married to the person making the decision and lives in the same house. There is no independent governor to stand up on behalf of donors. It is structurally impossible for the foundation to overrule its own founders because its own founders are the entire governance structure. That arrangement is manageable when everything is running smoothly. When the numbers start moving in the wrong direction, a 2-person board with no independent members stops being a governance shortcoming and starts being the thing that allows every other problem to accumulate without a formal stop. Now look at the 2024 numbers directly from the filing. Money in, $2.1 million. Money out, $5.1 million. That is a $3 million deficit in a single year, the same year the lifestyle brand was launching, selling out, and being covered everywhere as a cultural moment. Go back further, and the picture gets darker. In 2021, the charity raised $13 million. That was the goodwill year, the post-Oprah year, the year when global sympathy around Harry and Meghan was at its absolute peak. Then came 2022, $2 million. Then across the 3 years that followed, roughly $9 to $12 million combined, less than what a single year had produced at the height of public enthusiasm. The donor base did not taper gradually, the way charities typically experience when initial excitement settles into sustainable giving. It collapsed from $13 million to $2 million in a single year and never recovered. That is a specific signal. The people who gave in 2021 looked at what the organization was doing with their money in 2022 and decided not to give again. What was the money doing in the years it was still arriving at meaningful levels? In 2023, Archwell raised over $5 million. Of that, approximately $1.3 million reached charitable causes directly. The remaining roughly $4 million was absorbed by staff costs, consultants, operational overhead, and what media analyst Brian Glicklick described with notable precision as the trips the couple took to Nigeria and Colombia. His overall assessment of the foundation's purpose was specific and on the record. The public, he said, sees it as a self-serving publicity mechanism and a means of platforming other money-making ventures. That is not an anonymous tabloid source. That is a named professional giving his professional read of what the financial structure was actually doing. Now to the audit, because this is where the story moves from embarrassing into legally significant territory. On its federal tax form, the 990, which is a legal document signed under penalty of perjury, Archwell checked the box certifying that its finances are independently audited by an accountant. This is not an aspiration or a general statement of intent. It is a specific factual certification on a legal filing. Charity Watch asked to see that audit. That is their job. It is the single most important document a charity can produce for a watchdog review, because it is the independent verification that what the charity claims to be doing with its money corresponds to what the money actually did. Their first letter requesting the document went out January 22, 2024. No response. Second letter, December 6, 2024. No response. Third letter, January 6, 2026. No response. 3 written requests. 2 years of complete silence from an organization that had certified on a legal filing that the audit existed. There are only 2 explanations available for that silence. The first is that the audit is clean, complete, and sitting in a filing cabinet somewhere, and the organization simply chose not to produce it across 3 separate written requests for no coherent reason. That explanation does not hold up. A charity trying to rebuild donor confidence after a delinquency notice and a collapsing donor base does not sit on a clean audit that would resolve the questions being raised about it. Producing it costs almost nothing and buys back significant credibility. The second explanation is that the document does not exist in the form it was certified to exist on the legal filing. Charity Watch ultimately concluded that Archwell does not meet transparency benchmarks and was unable to assign the organization a rating. A charity that will not produce the document it certified exists to the organization whose entire professional purpose is reviewing exactly that kind of document is not running a transparency gap. It is running a transparency strategy. Now back to the delinquency and the specific date that sits right next to it in the timeline, because that juxtaposition is the most important detail in the entire story. May 3, 2024. California declares the Archwell Foundation delinquent. The official trigger is a filing issue, a check that reportedly never arrived. But state attorneys general do not pull an organization's license to operate over a single missing envelope unless the underlying paperwork is already in a condition that makes the office uncomfortable. The delinquency is the symptom. The preceding filing history is the condition. And 7 weeks before that notice landed, March 14, 2024, American Riviera Orchard launched on Instagram with flowers and honey jars and the warm haze of aspirational California living. Same household, same months. One project running like a serious commercial operation with coordinated launches and sold-out products. The other running like an afterthought. The pattern in those dates does not require interpretation. Then it happened again. The California registration lapsed a second time on May 15, 2025. 2 separate compliance failures in 2 years. The brand, meanwhile, never missed a scheduled product drop. When a compliance failure repeats twice in 2 years on the same registration, while the commercial operation never misses a launch window, the pattern stops being coincidence and starts being evidence of where the operational attention was actually directed. The human layer of this story matters as much as the documents. James Holt was there from the very beginning, at Windsor Castle on the wedding day in May 2018, managing the logistics of one of the most globally watched ceremonial events in recent memory. When Harry and Meghan chose to step back from royal life in 2020, Holt made his own decision. He walked with them across an ocean to California. He helped navigate the Oprah interview. He helped build and run the charity through everything that followed. The public battles, the relentless media cycles, the staff turnover that had become its own running narrative in royal commentary circles. People who knew the operation closely described him as perhaps the last aide remaining who truly understood firsthand what Harry and Meghan had experienced inside the palace. Not from reading it in a memoir, but from having been physically present through much of it. He stayed for 7 years. Through the Netflix documentary and the fallout. Through the memoir and the fallout. through the staff departures and the financial questions and the regulatory filings and all of it. Then in December 2025, when the staff cuts were announced and the deficit had become a matter of public record and the foundation was being quietly restructured into something smaller, James Holt packed up and went home to the United Kingdom to raise his family. No tell-all interview. No statement to the press. No on-the-record account of what 7 years had looked like from the inside. He simply left. He was not alone. The director of programs and operations departed in the same round of cuts. The person actually running the programmatic work, on a salary of $146,000 annually, gone in the same announcement that described the organization as expanding into something bigger. By various counts, more than 20 people have cycled out of the Sussex operation since it began. One royal source described the pattern bluntly. They churn through staff faster than normal people churn through toilet paper. People at the top of their professional fields, who had believed enough in the mission to uproot their lives for it, kept deciding they had seen enough. Then there is Dr. Sophie Chandaka at Cinnabale, the charity Harry co-founded in 2006 in his mother's memory, which itself collapsed publicly in early 2025. Chandaka was not a tabloid source. She was the chairwoman of the board, the person at the actual head of the governance table. And her account of what she was asked to do is specific. Harry's team came to her and asked the charity to defend Meghan from bad press. Her response was on the record. "We are not setting a precedent by which we become an extension of the Sussex PR machine." That phrase, an extension of the PR machine, came from the person who chaired the board of Harry's own charity. Now to the December 2025 restructure, because it is the final exhibit and arguably the most revealing. On December 19, 2025, the announcement came. The Archewell Foundation would be transitioning to become Archewell Philanthropies. The language was aspirational. The couple and their children would expand upon their global philanthropic endeavors as a family. The word expand appeared prominently. Bigger ambitions, broader reach, a new chapter. In the same week that announcement went out, 3 staff members were cut, representing more than half the remaining workforce. The executive director departed. The director of programs and operations was gone. Donations had fallen from $5.3 million to $2.1 million. The $3 million deficit was still in the filings. The missing audit was still unproduced. 2 California compliance failures were still on the record. You do not expand by cutting more than half your staff while donations contract by 60%. That is not expansion. That is a retreat dressed in the warmest possible public language. Here is the governance detail that matters most. The fiscal sponsorship model Archewell was moving toward typically carries fewer mandatory public disclosure requirements than a standalone, independent foundation. It reports less. The financial picture it presents to the outside world is less legible, less detailed, and less available for public scrutiny than the structure it was replacing. At the exact moment the scrutiny was at its highest, a documented public deficit, 3 unanswered letters from Charity Watch spanning 2 years, a delinquency on the California record, a second lapsed registration, ongoing questions about the relationship between the charity's activities and the commercial brand's activities. The organization restructured into a form that requires less public disclosure. That is not the kind of move that makes a regulator comfortable. That is the kind of move that makes a regulator lean in and look harder. The framing in the announcement centered on family. A family expanding its philanthropic work. Family is private. Family is personal. Family, the language implies, operates in a space that strangers should not enter carrying questions about where the money went. Except the money donated to the Archewell Foundation was not family money. It was money given in trust for charitable purposes by people who are entitled to a transparent accounting of where it went. The fiscal sponsorship pivot does not resolve that obligation. It obscures it by placing the financial activity into a structure that reports less publicly, requires fewer disclosures, and presents a less legible picture to anyone trying to follow the dollars. Pull back now and look at the full sequence, because the pattern in these dates is specific and visible without any interpretive assistance whatsoever. March 14, 2024, brand launches. May 3, 2024, charity declared delinquent. 2024, a $3 million deficit. 2025, California registration lapses a second time. May 2025, brand never missed a launch. December 2025, Charity restructured into a less transparent form while the brand continues operating on schedule. Every regulatory hit attached to the shared operation. Every compliance failure. Every public accounting of where the money went and did not go. Every question about governance and transparency. All of it on the charity side. And through all of it, the brand kept moving. American Riviera Orchard became, as ever. Products launched, sold out, new lines dropped on schedule. The Instagram presence stayed warm, aspirational, and visually separated from the paperwork accumulating on the other side of the household's financial picture. There is also a reputational dimension that matters commercially. A reputation is a form of financial collateral. When the charity side of an operation is generating headlines about delinquent filings, missing audits, and collapsing donor confidence, the commercial side of the same household cannot borrow against that reputation indefinitely. The Netflix investment in the As Ever brand was pulled in March 2026, the same period when the regulatory and financial picture of the shared household was most clearly in public view. Whether the two developments were directly connected is a question only the people inside those investment conversations can answer. But the timing sits in the timeline, and the timeline is the document. None of what is laid out here requires a palace source, an anonymous briefing, or a hostile journalist with an agenda. It requires reading the documents that the organizations themselves filed with the relevant authorities and asking what the dates and the numbers actually say when read in sequence rather than in isolation. The charity was delinquent in May 2024. The brand launched in March 2024. The registration lapsed again in May 2025. The brand never missed a launch window. The restructure came in December 2025 into a less transparent form at the moment of peak scrutiny. Paperwork does not have an agenda. It does not have feelings about the monarchy or about California or about what anyone's future should look like. It just has dates and numbers and boxes that were checked and documents that were requested and either produced or were not. In this case, what the dates and the numbers and the missing documents show, without anyone's opinion required to read them, is a documented pattern of where the serious operational attention was going and where it was not. That is the story the timeline tells, and it tells it clearly.